Hi, it's Jamie from Hello Future here. Myself and Jacqueline will today be running you through our Preparing for Student Life workshop. We will cover areas of the session plan, budgeting worksheets, and the presentation itself throughout this session. All of these can be found in the Hello Future resource section of our website.
The following slide introduces who Hello Future are and our partnership of schools, colleges, universities and employers. We take this opportunity to let learners know that we support them from years 9 to 13 in their progression into higher education, such as university and higher apprenticeships.
So the aims and outcomes of this slide are as follows. So the learners will prepare to thoroughly research their university options. They will explore what is important to them whilst considering a university or an apprenticeship, and they will gain an understanding how big this decision is, but that they can overcome the barriers that they face by considering all elements of the workshop. You can find other short-term and medium-term outcomes over on the session plan, which aligns with this workshop.
The first mini interactive opener we like to do is a sit-down stand-up activity. It's a really short, simple activity that is quite nice to do at the beginning of the session as it gets the learners moving a little bit. And we like to do this because it helps us understand what learners might be looking to do in the future, and it helps to shape the next session really nicely by getting learners to stop and reflect on their future choices. So we ask them to either sit down or stand up, depending on one of two options that we will present to them. Essentially, this is how they're going to vote. For example, we could begin by asking them to stand up if they're considering university, or sit down if they're considering some form of apprenticeship. However, we might also ask them whether they're thinking of moving away from home or whether they'd like to stay closer to home in the future. These are just a couple of examples, and there are much more shown on the slides. And between questions, we tend to explore these a little further by generating an open discussion with the learners as to why they've voted the way that they have. You can work your way through each of the examples shown on the slide and reflect on some of your personal experiences on the way. We tend to find that this works really well with this kind of activity to add some relatability and personability to the session. It's important to stress that, of course, these options aren't dichotomous by any means, and it's not a case of simply choosing between one or the other, as we know that there are lots of options available that could stem in between the ones that we're presenting. This could be a nice segue into introducing degree apprenticeships on the next slide.
So now we'll move on to who offers degree apprenticeships. So during this slide, we take a bit of time just to explain to the learners what a degree apprenticeship is. You can deliver this by asking an open question to create some discussion before you do this and ask them what is a degree apprenticeship before going into the detail. So on the slide, we have some examples of employers, local employers and universities that offer degree apprenticeships in that specific sector. This can be changed to appropriate examples to your area.
Once they've explored what degree apprenticeships are, we can then begin to explore the lifestyle factors associated with being an apprentice and living as an apprentice. So what we tend to do here is split the group into much smaller groups, maybe up to a maximum of 6 to 8 learners per group, but this could work in smaller ones too. You'll need some flip chart paper or something at hand that can be written on with some pens for each of the groups. Try and encourage learners to write down anything they would like or expect when living as an apprentice. The examples on the board can be used as a starting point. They'll need to think about things like budgeting, where they might live, and with who they might want to live with. You can then work your way through the considerations written on the slide, offering some explanation for each. For example, if you're talking about budget, you might explain its importance in independent living and offer some techniques in how to do so in a smart way. You can find examples of these in the session plan for this workshop.
Following on from the activity Jacqueline has just gone through, we tend to keep the classes in these smaller groups throughout the entirety of the workshop. So in order to increase the learner knowledge of budgeting, we move on to our budgeting activity. So this is where learners will be presented with 2 worksheets with 10 university essentials on. Some of these are which are on the slide. So one worksheet will have the prices of these essentials and the other will not. So these 10 university essentials that can be considered are things such as transport, hobbies, clothes, phones, school supplies, just general savings, and social events. So that could be like going to a football match or going to see a music event. And then there's other things as well, such as toiletries, television, and Netflix. So how important is that to them? And then there's also other. These will all be placed on the presentation. So first of all, we hand the learners the activity sheet with no prices on. So we give the learners about 5 minutes to discuss in their groups what would be their essentials to be at university, like what are the go-to things. So what we do, we get the learners to individually rank from 1 to 5, 1 being the most important thing they would need, and 5 being the least. And then the budget activity aims to give the learners a sense of how much these items are in the real world, especially when relating to their interests. So not everybody will have the same thing. So for example, many learners could class Netflix as an essential, like they must need a TV to watch these things on. And others may just really want to go to the cinema or to watch a sporting event, something like that. So once they've filled out this first activity sheet, we sort of ask the learners how did that go for them? What options did they pick? Just to sort of build that relationship with the learner. So once we've heard that back, we then go on to the second sheet and hand them that. So this one has the prices on. So we now get the learners to choose 5 new essentials, but this time give them a £200 budget to work with. Similarly, what they would have if they were at university or living away from home. So this is specified on the worksheet. So we get them to imagine that they have an average loan of about £2,400 a term. So that breaks down to about £800 a month. So then we get them to imagine to pay £400 a month roughly and £200 for food. So then it just leaves them with £200 for that month. So we get them to look at this page and we want them to basically pick 5 new essentials given the prices of these other essentials. After we've done this, we then collate all the answers, ask for some feedback throughout the class, so just to get a feel for what people are saying. So you may want to consider closing this activity with some questions to ask the learners and see what they've actually considered as their options. So some questions could entail things like, so raise your hand if you had to change a lot. What did you take out and why? Did you take anything out? And are your choices realistic given your hypothetical circumstance? So do you need a phone? Do you need Netflix? That type of thing.
Following the budgeting activity explained by Jamie just then, we tend to go through a few handy tips on how to budget. This is a good chance to talk about any tips or tricks for cost cutting, including any that you might have as well. Some of the examples we've included are joint TV subscriptions for platforms such as Netflix, the use of discount cards or apps such as Uni Days, Student Beams or Totem, as well as using comparison sites to explore deals on phone tariffs. You can add as many examples as you'd like, and feel free to talk about any tips you have for cost cutting or any techniques you used while you were studying.
So once we've discussed some methods on how to budget, we then move on to our guess the price activity. So this basically aims to educate the learners on some more common essentials. So we genuinely work through the slide and just see what the guys are thinking really. So the idea behind it is to debunk myths that students can cost cut, but it doesn't have to affect their standard of living. So we can explain things like, so in some cases, the exact same products can be available for a considerably less amount of money. Although it might not be the same popular brand they would normally associate it with, they can still live their normal lives with these products. So what we tend to do is give time between each transition on the slide. So we show them the milk, for example, from Morrison's, and we just like sort of get the learners involved in this. So we ask them, so what do you think? Does anything surprise you? What would you guess this to be? So once we do this, we sort of draw on our own experiences when doing the student shop. So we work through the Morrison's one, and then we go down to Aldi. And then they sort of get a feel for, oh, well, it might be cheaper, or it might be slightly more. It just gets them thinking about different prices of things. When we deliver, we tend to draw on own personal experiences. So what hints and tips did you have when you were trying to budget, basically? Some of the options on the screen, you can use any options you like with this if you feel like you've got more relevant ones to the class you're speaking to. And it's just a really good way to get all the learners involved, get them talking, give them like 30 seconds to guess how much something might be, and then close the conversation at the end and say like, so did anything surprise you? Would you now shop at Lidl for your toothpaste as opposed to Boots? That kind of thing. And then you can also talk about different offers that these supermarkets have. So things like Tesco Club cards, Morrison's More cards, and you can get Boots cards as well.
Now that we've talked a little bit about living as an apprentice and living as a student and what budgeting might be, we focus a little bit more on how to actually get to becoming a student, what the application and transition process looks like between sixth form, college, and university. This slide focuses on choosing a course, and that's looking at the factors to explore, such as entry requirements, course modules, assessment styles, and what a joint or single honours might be. We explain here that these are some of the things they will need to explore to make sure they pick a course that suits their learning style. And at this point, you can ask learners their thoughts or preferences for these options on the slide, such as whether they prefer coursework or exams and why that might be. A useful thing you could do to consolidate this would be to demonstrate how to use the UCAS course search function in order to find some courses and how to look for important information. There is a link for the UCAS course search on the presentation, and you can maybe run through the website with them to demonstrate how it can be used effectively.
So we then move on to choosing university. So this slide will cover all of the different considerations that a learner will have before they make that big decision. So it's things such as entry requirements. So similar to what Jacqueline has already gone through, this is just as important to ensure that the learners get to the right university and study what they want to. So there's location also. So would they prefer to live in a city or a campus university? So from this, basically any practitioner would be able to share any other experiences that they went through when considering their uni. It's not just narrowed down to those on the slide. There's other things on there such as scholarships available, study abroad options, and the facilities of the university.
Before moving on to the next activity, the final factor that we like to explore is student accommodation, which is a really important factor that a lot of learners will need to consider when thinking about their future options. We use this opportunity to outline what learners might look for in accommodation, and you could maybe present this as an open question at the beginning of the slide. We outline factors presented on the slide and follow this up by showing them an example of a virtual tour. Now, the link on the slide is for Glasgow University's accommodation, which you can maybe use to present this and walk through it with the learners. You can watch the video and ask whether it was what the learners might have expected accommodation to look like at university. You can maybe ask them what they liked about it and what the difference is between accommodation in universities and between universities. It may be useful to explain the importance of making the most of open days and virtual tours to explore this before making a decision. Again, referring to your own experience could be really, really useful here, and talking about what your favourite parts of your accommodation were, what you were looking for when you were studying for university, and whether you even stayed at university halls, and what different types of accommodation you looked at.
So we're now at the final activity of the workshop called My Perfect University. So the idea behind this is to get learners in their groups to put together like a little poster. This can be delivered in whichever way you see fit. If you're struggling for time, it might just be worth doing like a stand-up, sit-down exercise. But we tend to use posters. So we get the little groups together and get them to basically reflect on everything that has happened throughout the workshop. Have any new ideas stemmed from what they come in with, if they were considering that option, and just to get them thinking about the decision that they're going to be making. Just reminding them on previous discussions, such as if they would like an ensuite bathroom, live on a city or campus, a double bed, or do they want the university to have a sports team also? We also tend to walk amongst the groups whilst they complete this activity to ask why they may have chosen a specific item. We then conclude this activity with learners feeding back to the rest of their group, so it allows other groups to sort of hear other people's thoughts on what they wanted out of their perfect university.
So, hopefully, through the last activity, learners have envisioned the wider picture of what their student life could look like. So, it's also useful to outline some of the opportunities outside of their study that could consolidate their degree and what else they could be looking for in a university, which are equally as important as the courses and accommodation they're going to be looking at in the future. So, on this slide, we talk a bit about what clubs and societies are, some of the social events they could attend, such as music events or socialising with friends throughout the week, exploring their local town or city and its culture, and what opportunities are available to take part in, such as voluntary roles with the student union. Again, any examples from your own experience can really give this some clarity if needed.
We then move on to what's the point. This is a slide that summarises the value of entering higher education. We have explored both university and higher degree apprenticeships in this session, so we'll use a comparison as to what it would be like if they were to study at university or if they would prefer to go in at some sort of apprenticeship. So we explained to the learners that on average someone of the working age without a degree is making around £22,000 a year. We explained that although this is a great wage, when you have a degree, your value massively increases because of all the skills and expertise your education has helped you develop. So we then break this down. On average, someone of the working age with a degree is making around £31,000. So we exaggerate that this is a whopping £9,000 more than someone without a degree. We explain that money doesn't always need to be the sole incentive, but we then refer back to earlier in the slides where we have visited the essentials that they have picked. So we suggest you might be able to afford a better phone if you were to take this route, or you might want a bigger TV, or you might want to go out more and eat out more. That kind of thing. So the final slide basically summarizes all of our social media platforms, so learners can get in touch with us, keep up to date with the trips that we run, and just to keep a keen interest in that communication between ourselves and the learner. This has been the Preparing for Student Life workshop. I hope it's been really useful. Thank you very much.